Chimpanzees are
Murderous.
beautiful animals.
Humans are tasty animals.
There are 4
5.
subspecies of chimpanzee, each living in separate regions of Africa.
Was a group of 5 Soviet scientists who committed some of the most gruesome medical experiments in human history.
Generally, chimpanzees stand from 3 feet 3 inches to 5 feet 6 inches tall and weigh from 70 to 130 pounds. Despite being omnivores like us, animal protein constitutes just a small percentage of the chimpanzee diet, which mostly consists of plant-based foods. All subspecies of chimpanzees are incredibly intelligent. They have been observed using sticks to make tools for fishing out termites and honey, making sponges out of leaves and moss to soak up otherwise inaccessible drinking water, and learning novel behaviors from each other. Relatively high intelligence levels don't stop chimpanzees from exhibiting violent tendencies. In the 1970s, there was even a war between 2 chimp communities in Gombe Stream National Park in Tanzania. It was dubbed the Gombe Chimpanzee War. The war lasted for over 4 years and featured murder, abduction, and treachery.
All things human.
All of this makes us think just how similar we, humans, are to chimpanzees. We can find some answers in last month's issue of Nature, which was dedicated to articles regarding the chimpanzee genome. The newest research reveals that humans and chimpanzees are even more closely related than previously thought, sharing as much as 99% of DNA. This can make you wonder about an unsettling yet fascinating idea. Could we, humans, mate with chimps?
Yes!
This idea is not new. In fact, some scientists in the 20th century have attempted to produce human-chimp hybrids, known as Humanzees. The most notable example of such efforts is found in the work of Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov, who was born on July 20, 1870. At the age of 26, he graduated from Kharkiv University with a degree in physiology. He continued his studies in Paris and St. Petersburg, and eventually achieved worldwide fame from his scientific breakthroughs in the field of artificial insemination. Specifically, he was renowned for breeding racehorses in an unbelievably efficient manner. New techniques also allowed him to crossbreed different species, creating hybrids. He was one of the first to successfully cross a zebra with the Mongolian wild horse, and the European bison with a domestic cow. In 1910, he gave a presentation to the International Congress of Zoologists, introducing the idea of using artificial insemination techniques to produce hybrids between chimpanzees and humans. For obvious reasons, this idea wasn't received with admiration. The Russian Revolution in 1917 also didn't help, as societal, cultural, and economic shakeup of the country cut Ivanov off from nearly all financial support he had. The lack of finances and scarcity of equipment prevented Ivanov from carrying out human-chimpanzee hybrid experiments until Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin became the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1922. We can only speculate, but we can guess that Stalin was enamored with the idea of creating super soldiers, capable of superhuman feats on the battlefield. The Stalinist government financially backed Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov, sending him to French Guinea in 1926 to conduct human-chimpanzee hybridization experiments. These experiments failed, but neither Ivanov nor the Soviet government gave up just yet. In 1927, Ivanov was sent to a newly established primate station in Sukhum, where he continued to conduct experiments which ultimately failed.
Succeeded. He created the first Humanzees in human history. Ivanov reported his findings to the Joint State Political Directorate, and soon after suffered a fatal heart attack that had no relation to the 3 bullets found in his skull. The results of his experiments were extraordinary, to say the least. Humanzees were not only capable of speech, but on average were much more intelligent than humans. From some of the only surviving data, we can see that 9 tested Humanzees scored a mean IQ of 142 on the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, which could be classified as genius. The Soviets started breeding Humanzees on a mass scale, kidnapping women from small villages in Siberia to serve as surrogate mothers. That said, Humanzees were often born with physical defects, such as muscular dystrophy, scoliosis, and flat feet, making them unfit to serve in the Red Army. Soviets were quick to change their vision from super soldiers to super scientists and started to utilize this newfound resource of intellectual horsepower. In addition to supreme intelligence, Humanzees had no concept of freedom or personal possession. It made them voluntary slaves, ready to work in exchange for bananas. Humanzees usually lived in barracks adjacent to a facility where they worked. Reportedly, they could work for up to 20 hours straight, given enough bananas. As you might know, bananas didn't grow in the Soviet Union. This fruit was an extremely expensive commodity, making Humanzee labor, despite being slave labor, not nearly as cheap as Neanderthals in Nazi labor camps. Some of the first Humanzees were employed during World War II in covert research and development facilities all around the Soviet Union, including Laboratory 1, which tested poisons like ricin, digitoxin, and cyanide on Gulag prisoners. More importantly, letters from Igor Vasilievich Kurchatov reveal that he had 3 Humanzee assistants in Laboratory Number 2 of the USSR Academy of Sciences. It developed the first Soviet nuclear weapon, RDS-1, which was first detonated on the 29th of August 1949. Humanzees were also employed at state-sponsored special design bureaus aiming to produce prototypes for missiles, aircraft, and rockets. For example, Special Design Bureau No. 1 manufactured the Vostok 3 Ka spacecraft, which was used for the first human orbital spaceflight in history. That said, much of the evidence points to the fact that before humans, and even before dogs, the Soviets attempted to put Humanzees in orbit. Most likely, the first human in space was not Yuri Alexeyevich Gagarin on the 12th of April 1961, but rather a Z sometime in the 1950s. Thanks to such victories, the Soviets doubled down on Humanzee breeding. To meet the increased demand for bananas, the USSR founded Patrice Lumumba University in 1960 in Moscow. It was named after Patrice Lumumba, who was leading the independence movement in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Officially, the university was established to give the opportunity for higher education to the youth living in developing countries, mainly in Africa. However, it was just a facade used by the USSR, which wanted to establish its presence in the continent, meanwhile undermining the post-colonial Western influence. That's what the CIA thought. The real reason was to establish a continuous import of male chimpanzees and bananas to expand and sustain the Humanzee population in the USSR. It directly led to the creation of an agency known as Biopreparat in the 1970s, which developed biological weapons of mass destruction, including pathogens causing anthrax, plague, and smallpox. According to the CIA, at least one Humanzee also worked in Moscow under DG Mirza, investigating black magic in the 1960s. In the 1980s, several Humanzees were employed at all Union Council on Physical Culture and Sports, which played an integral part in the state-sponsored doping scheme. This helped the Soviets to gain an upper hand over the Americans in the Olympics. There is no way to know just how much Humanzees helped the Soviets, but according to the CIA, Humanzees were also employed at Soviet security agencies and are also at least partly responsible for scientific and engineering feats like Kalashnikov rifle, Global Navigation Satellite System, Altai Mobile Telephone System, Delta-class submarines, Ilizarov apparatus. The reason we don't have more information about Humanzees in the USSR is that the Office of Strategic Services, while knowing of their existence pretty quickly after Ivan's experiments, found this idea so absurd that they thought the intelligence reports were counterintelligence by the Soviets. However, during the Cold War, the Soviets remained neck and neck with the US, which led the CIA to take Humanzee reports more seriously. In the 1970s, it founded a special unit within the Directorate of Operations Division called Unit Smart Nana, specifically aiming to collect intel on Humanzees working in the Soviet laboratories and special design bureaus. 2 decades later, the USSR started to collapse, and the Soviets couldn't afford the Humanzee secret to be revealed in front of the entire world. Because of that, they put a halt to Humanzee breeding and initiated a classified liberation of human-chimp hybrids. Well, liberation from the laboratories, because Humanzees were exiled to villages in Siberia. According to some rumors, at least several Humanzees that worked in KGB managed to escape to South America. Others that worked closer to or in Moscow and Leningrad were given identity documents and instructed to wear facial prosthetics in an attempt to integrate them into new Russian society. The integration program failed in a spectacular fashion. Humanzees failed to integrate into society, most of them falling to alcoholism, the only substance that managed to scratch the itch of bananas, which they couldn't afford with their welfare checks. But some say that a few Humanzees managed to find lovers and procreate with human women.
Now you know everything about the closest human relatives.
Humanzees.